they and at different levels, they all surrendered themselves to that purpose that was bigger than themselves. They surrendered themselves to their soul. They surrendered themselves to the divine intelligence. They surrendered themselves to God, and in that surrender, they transcended their human egoic limitations, and they tapped into another dimension of life. And I think that's when life, God, the infinite intelligence, the divine, was able to use them and flow through them and express through them and manifest through them. And that's where miracles happen, where they were no longer the doer, and life was doing them, and life was manifesting through them in ways, I'm sure, that were probably beyond what they could have imagined with their own limited self. And so for me, it's like, what if you surrender and you didn't get less, but you got more? Maybe not what you thought, maybe not what you planned, maybe not what you expected, but more, because, the mind is limited. The ego is limited. The personal power is very limited. And so surrender in a simplistic way is, yes, it's a letting go of control, or I should say, a letting go of the illusion that we were in control in the first place. It's when we stop manipulating and forcing life to fit our limited idea of how we think it should be and who we think we should be, so that we can be available and open to take the limitations off of life that is unlimited, so that we can be available and open to this innate intelligence that we are part of, to live us and flow through us. And so for me, the old paradigm, which we've kind of been conditioned into as a culture up until now, has been all about asking the question, is a like ego-based model of living life, personal power-based, which is about what do I want? This sense of I, which is still I, based on a limitation. And you can create life and manifest life from the ego and create a good life, but it will be limited.
Welcome to Ignite the Spark Within, a podcast designed to do just that. Ignite your spark within you. I'm your host, Sarah Malone, owner of Spark Fitness and Lifestyle Coaching, and voted Yahoo Finance's top 10 female coaches to follow in 2021. I believe everyone has a fire inside them, a powerful purpose, a story waiting to be told, and everyone can uncover and unleash this power. Every day you have the choice to either let your experiences shape you, or take control and use your experiences to shape the world around you. You were made to experience happiness, freedom, joy, purpose, love, passion, and abundance. Disrupt the status quo, think for yourself, and join forces with those around you doing the same. Join me for thought-provoking conversations along with the strategies needed in order to help you ignite your spark within. Well, welcome back to the show, everyone. I am so excited to welcome a new and emerging guest with me today, Kute Blackson. Did I say that name right?
Yes, Kute.
Okay.
Kute
Okay. I'm so good. So this is so exciting. You guys may have, if you don't already follow him, go give him a follow immediately. You will find out why as soon as you land on his page or his website. Kute Blackson is the beloved inspirational speaker and transformation. There we go. Are you there?
I'm here. It
Beautiful.
froze.
Yes. He is widely considered the next generation leader in the field of personal development, and he's been featured on shows like Larry King Now, Fox and Friends, Dr. Drew, as well as Inc. magazine calls him the mindfulness guru, Billionaires' go-to for advice. Kute offers a fresh, bold look at spiritual awareness for a whole new generation. He was actually born in Ghana, West Africa. Kute's multicultural upbringing as the child of a Japanese mother and a Ghanaian father has spanned 4 different continents. His unique lineage lay the foundation for his approach to breaking down barriers and unlocking an individual's true gifts and greatness. Now, aside from being an inspiring author, he is also a teacher and a speaker, and he's also a coach. We are going to link all of the information that you need to know in the show notes. I won't bore you with any more introduction because you can find out so much information about him on Google. Just welcome and thank you so much for joining me on Ignite the Spark Within, Kute.
Thanks for having me.
So I'd like to open this show because your background is very interesting. And I'm sure my audience, as well as myself, would love to learn just where you came from and how you came into this path of spiritual work and spiritual coaching and teaching. Because everybody's path is so different. I know mine has
Yeah.
been very unique. I'd love to just hear your journey.
Yeah. I was born in Ghana, West Africa. My father's from Ghana. He's as Ghanaian as you can get. My mother is Japanese as you can get. I grew up in London, as I mentioned, and live in the US now and sometimes Mexico. And so I feel like I'm a citizen of the world, from everywhere and nowhere all at the same time, um, which was a blessing and a curse growing up, because as a child, I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I'm like, I'm not African and I'm not like Japanese and I'm not British. Like, what the hell am I? Which,
Yes.
as a young boy, I think drove me to ask the question. It's perhaps what drove me into a deeper sense of spirituality, to ask the question of like, well, who am I? And who am I really? And if I'm not this and I'm not that, and I'm not this and I'm not that, and where do I belong? And who am I? And so that started a spiritual seeking quest as a young kid. And so as a boy, I was a very empathetic kid. And I felt people's pain very deeply. And there was always a part of me that wanted to alleviate suffering in some way. And
Yes.
I remember, some would say I have a bit of an interesting childhood, but I didn't think my childhood was that interesting for me. It just felt like everybody else's. And so as a young boy, around 6, 7, my first memories were I remember seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor, and she picks up the gravel, the sand that this man walks on, wipes it on her face, and stands up. And so week after week, call that a miracle, but week after week, I grew up seeing blind people see and deaf people hear and people stand up out of wheelchairs. The same man who gravelled she picked up would look at a woman in a wheelchair and say, why are you in this wheelchair? Stand up. You're not sick, stand up. And he put his hands on them and they would stand up, and somebody would come in with crutches and they hadn't walked in years, and he would say, throw your crutches away. And they would walk. And so I grew up seeing this with my own eyes, day in, day out. And it didn't seem extraordinary to me because it's all I knew. And so this man was my father, and he built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa, hundreds of thousands of followers, had a huge church in London, about 4,000 people every Sunday. And so he was a very spiritual, mystical character, so to say, so to speak. And so I grew up in this environment of possibility and the miraculous and the mystical. My mother was Buddhist, and so I grew up meditating with my mother, going to church on Sunday. And so my speaking career began. You said, how did I get into this? When I was age 8, I was thrown into the audience one day. My father said, speak. And that began my speaking career. And every few months, my father would throw me into the audience and say, speak. And so words would just kind of come out of my mouth, and I didn't think too much about it. And then when I was 14, I was ordained as a minister. And that's another moment where my life shifted, whereby my father basically announced to the congregation, my son is taking over my ministry. He's my successor. And no one discussed it with me. And so I always knew I wanted to help people. But in that moment, I just didn't feel that this was my path. I just didn't feel that this was my soul's journey and trajectory. But as a 14-year-old kid, I didn't have the courage to speak my truth to my father, because my fear was, if I dared to be myself and speak my truth, then I'm going to be outcast. I'm going to be alone. And so I said nothing. And like many of us, I allowed fear to kind of hijack my voice. And for 4 years, I went through an inner questioning, an inner turmoil. I would sneak into my father's office, and he had about 1,000 books on self-help and spirituality and religion. And so I grew up reading, just trying to understand life, and why am I here? And what's the purpose of my life? And so I grew up reading the Eastern mystics, people like Krishnamurti and Osho, to the Western folks like Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, and Marianne Williamson. And so
some of my favorite mentors.
This became my obsession. I'd go to school, come home from school, have dinner, and I'd read for 4 hours, as a 10-year-old kid. This was my obsession. And so from 14 to 18, it was very challenging for me, because I knew that the life that was basically set out for me was not my path. And so I tried to fit myself into a box to become who I thought I needed to be.
Yes.
But it was incredibly painful, you know.
Mm-mm,
And when I
mm-mm.
turned 18, the pain grew so great that I chose not to go to university. And I felt my soul calling me in a completely different direction. I wanted to go, I had visions of going into the field of self-help and, you know, doing seminars and writing books, because I saw that there was a whole new way of inspiring people. I felt such a resonance. And so I think that sometimes what your soul guides you to do doesn't always make sense to your logic or your mind. And what your soul guides you to do isn't always comfortable or convenient, you know. And I was terrified because I felt the rightness of my soul calling. I felt like this is true. And so I knew what I had to do, which was leave everything behind. And that was a very scary moment for a young kid who loved his father, even though we weren't close, and having to disappoint literally hundreds of thousands of people. And so at 18, I looked into my future and I saw that I could take over my father's church and I could be his successor. But if I didn't have myself, if I didn't have my soul, if I didn't have my truth and my integrity, what kind of success
What good is it?
What good is it? You know, you can't be truly fulfilled and happy being someone that you're not and living someone else's life. And if I lie to myself now, I'm going to have to lie to myself for the rest of my life.
Yes.
So I decided to have that conversation with my father, which changed the trajectory of my life. We had the conversation. I told him I'm not taking over. We didn't speak for 2.5 years. Really challenging. But long story short, I believe that when you follow your soul, you will always end up in the right place at 100%. The right time, even though the route that you take may not be the one that you most expect. And so I ended up winning a green card in the green card lottery that enabled me to come to the US as an 18.
Beautiful blessing for you.
Yeah. 2 suitcases, 1 suitcase full of clothes, 1 suitcase full of self-help books, and $800 in my pocket, and following my soul. And went and found many of the mentors and the teachers that I shared with you, and studied with some of them, learned from some of them, went to their events, you know, knocked on their doors, harassed some of them. And a couple of years after being in the US, there was another moment when, I mean, that's a whole nother story, but a few things didn't work out. Let's say that, relationships and dreams I had. And so I got to the point where I decided I was going to travel. I wanted to know my truth. I wanted to know God. I wanted to know my purpose for myself. And so I shaved my head, put my stuff in storage, broke up with the girlfriend, and traveled. I said, I'm not going to come back to America until I find certain answers for myself. And I walked the Camino, which is a 900 kilometer walk in northern Spain, in search of answers. Whilst there, I met a man who said, go to India. And a few weeks later, I found myself in India and strolling around, meeting teacher and guru and having experience, going to temples, just seeking, like, what is the purpose of my life? And so it was in India where things really cracked open for me, and things shifted and things awakened. And that's when I came back to the US and was guided to just start working with people as a young kid, you know, in my 20s. And people came, one person showed up and another person showed up. And slowly, I kind of created a way of working with people, and people's lives transformed, and it just snowballed and grew into small groups and larger groups. And here we are.
When you speak about this story, there's so many thoughts in me that come up. Number one, how much I resonate with you in this, of this incessant need and persistence to follow that call of your soul.
Yes.
I mean, just like you, I felt it at a very young age. And although I look back and I say, I could have done the jump sooner, I could have done this. In some ways, I feel like that was my soul's journey, was to endure some of those pains or challenges in that. And not break out of it too soon, right? Like sometimes we can get out of the fire too soon and it affects our soul's purpose. But, you know, what I'm finding in you is just this, at a very young age, such an old soul lives within you. I can feel it. I can see it. This old soul that knew exactly what it's here to do. And it's like your ego took a little bit to catch up to that. And I almost feel like that's part of the ego refinement of our work and our journey and the playtime the school that we get to be engaged in here. But I feel like a lot of people whether they admit it out loud or not. It takes a leader to come out and say it first about this feeling of displacement. And I find this, I'm a therapist, I'm a coach as well, I'm a speaker, all these things. So I hear different ways in which people say the same thing, and that's they don't have a feeling of home. And so I guess my question for you is, how do we recognize that feeling? Like, what in you knew that you were suffering, right? Everything was great for you logistically. And that may be the case for many other people too. Their life may look well organized and well designed, but they are not fulfilled, passionate, and abundant. You probably felt more successful walking, those 900 or so than you did back at home, having everything set up for you. And this is all just my long-winded version of asking, how can we know when we're suffering and it's not a suffering that has to do with our soul's purpose?
Yeah, I think for me, it was this subtle feeling, or maybe not so subtle, but subtle feeling, because on the surface, everything should be fine and could be fine. And many people would have been happy with my life and setup. But you know that feeling when you try some clothes on, you go to the store, and it's kind of like really cool clothes, but it doesn't quite fit you right. And you're like, well, if I don't like lift my hands up, then maybe it kind of fits. If I don't close the front buttons, then maybe it kind of, if I don't move,
totally.
And before you know, like if I just stand still and don't move, it looks good. But the moment I move, too tight, right? And so for me, it was kind of like that. It's just like something just didn't fit right, and something didn't feel right. And so I think how we know is there's that feeling, and sometimes it's subtle, like doesn't quite trying really hard to make myself feel good in this, but it doesn't. And I think if you have to try really hard, that's a sign. But also, if many times there's a level of pain, and sometimes that level of pain is a depression, maybe a mild depression, and we don't even realize that we're depressed, but we just feel like low grade tired. We don't feel quite alive. We don't feel in touch with the joy. But we convince ourselves, but I should. But when there's that feeling of like, sometimes it's not even like full blown depression. It's just I just kind of don't feel.
I feel non-motivated,
and that can be even more difficult than I just feel like shit. Because when I feel like shit, it's obvious. And so that sort of lack of aliveness, lack of motivation, lack of I'm excited about life can be a sense. Then we can progress to the feeling of angst, the feeling of depression, the feeling of like, I feel terrible, which is another level of the pain.
Which,
that
like you said, is kind of a blessing, because at least it gets painful enough to make us move.
It's more obvious. And so so that pain can be a sign, maybe sometimes that pain manifests as a sort of physical ailment, like, backache, or what, I have this knee ache, or why is my eye red and I have an eye infection. It might manifest as a temporary thing through your body, or maybe even as a kind of ongoing, like a disease in some way, a chronic disease that manifests. And so to me, these can be signs where we may not know, but this is how it ends up manifesting. And I think we should pay attention. So I kind of tell people, look, I think one of the things that tends to keep us stuck are all the ways that we don't tell ourselves the truth, all the ways that we you could say lie to ourselves. And sometimes the lying to ourselves is not intentional. Sometimes it's just unconscious. It's just denial. Sometimes we've been lying to ourselves so long that we don't even know that we're lying to ourselves. We just think that what we feel and who we are is who we are, but it's not. But we've just been conditioned to be that version of ourselves. And then we wonder, like, why am I not feeling happy? Because we're not being our authentic selves. We're not we're being who we think we need to be in order to get love and validation and approval. And we've been that way so long that we think that the version of ourselves that we're being is who we are, but it's not. And now we don't feel alive and aligned. And so I think if we just willing to start with, okay, can I tell myself the truth? What lies have I been telling myself? And just the willingness to start getting honest and real and feeling into, like, so often we feel some layer of pain that we just talked about, but we kind of distract ourselves. You know, we drink it away, smoke it away, drug it away, sex it away, shop it away, social media it away, just so that we don't have to like touch into that pain or that feeling, because sometimes we're also afraid, oh, if I really let myself feel that, it's never going to end. If I let myself feel that, I might have to acknowledge the truth, and then, you know, with the consequence, and I don't want to deal with that. So let me just be in denial and not deal, and that pain continues. So I think if we're willing to start with, what lies am I telling myself, and just ask the question, even if you're not sure, what lies am I telling myself? Wow, I don't feel happy. I'm not in love anymore with this person. I hate my job, you know. Yeah, I have an alcohol issue. And if we're just willing to start with the truth, to me, there's no transformation without truth. And I think one of the things that sometimes stops us from getting in touch with the truth is the fear of the consequence. If we're willing to just take the pressure off of ourselves from even having to take action. It's like, oh, you don't have to take action. I don't have to break up. You don't have to leave your job, but just say, I hate my job. And just feel what that brings up. That begins a process inside. So I think if we can start there, that's a beginning.
Oh, huge, because not only is it the, like you said, being able to go into the feelings, but as long as we can simply honor the feelings and allow them to come up, allow ourselves to feel them, that's half the battle. I think what we're trying to get away from and towards most often when we deny the truth, or when we go into these patterns of denying who we really are in order to be someone that we've been trained to be rather than who we truly are, is because of feelings. It's comes down to this human experience and these feelings. And either we are afraid, it's like when we can ask ourselves those questions when a lie is coming up, and we say, well, if, you know, okay, if I expose this lie, what happens? What happens when I expose the lie? And we really get to know where our fears are, or the fact that they're not even there, that the perception of something horrible happening once we acknowledge, maybe I'm not in the right place right now in my life. I followed a career that is not my true passion. And what does that mean when I acknowledge that? That means that I have to do, some people view it as, you know, that now I have to redefine my whole self. And it's like, whoa, that's a big task. Why would I want to go down that road? So it can be, like he said, so simple of just asking yourself these questions. And then on the flip end of that is like, what would light me up? What are the things that light me up in this world? What are the things that I'm naturally drawn to and called to and pulled to and have, oh, dare I say it, a desire and a joy to do? Because I believe that we were put here to fulfill our desires, and the desires of our heart are naturally going to fall in line with our purpose and our calling in the direction of.
Absolutely.
So beautiful. So this topic of pain, I would like to go into that, because pain is an interesting topic for people. And I believe that it can be misperceived. I think sometimes discomfort and uncertainty can be misinterpreted as pain. So when you're going in this journey of like selling everything, and you're going on this soul journey, you know, it takes a courageous person. And trust me, I did the same thing. I uprooted myself completely. So I had to acknowledge that what I was stepping into was just unknown. It wasn't painful itself. It was not painful. And that I could handle whatever uncertainty lay on the other end. So how can we encourage people to tell the difference between pain and discomfort versus like, it's painful here because I'm not supposed to be here, right? Like you said, there's a level of, this is too hard. I'm like forcing myself in this role, in this mode. Whereas there's a sense of ease that comes when you're following your soul and the call of that, but it's not necessarily comfortable.
Yeah, I think to me, pain is a gift. Pain is a blessing. Pain is not good or bad. For me, pain is feedback. We just have a culture, I think, that has not taught us how to be with pain. You know, from the moment we're born, even as children, oh, you feel pain? Oh, just Suck it up. You feel pain, don't feel that. It's going to be okay. You feel pain, go on TV, right? You feel pain, well, here's a pill you can take just to get rid of the pain. Just don't deal with the pain, but all the feelings that we don't deal with, we suppress, and end up manifesting later on, which create more pain because we've so stuffed layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of pain that we haven't allowed ourselves to feel fully and release fully. So now we're full of pain, right? And then we really feel it. And so for me, pain is not bad. It's just feedback, and it's a friend that we have to cultivate a relationship with. It's often showing us a part of us that is needing our attention. It's showing us a part of us where, wow, maybe I'm not fully aligned. Maybe I'm not telling myself the truth. And so I think if we can look at the pain and get into relationship with it and seek the feedback and the message, like, what is this pain telling me that I'm afraid of? What is this pain communicating to me that I need to listen to? What is this pain, expressing or trying to teach me? I remember I had a pain recently from exercise, right? Doing some exercise things. I had a pain in my left wrist. And I was like, well, I could just, chalk it off as, just got an exercise accident, injury. On one level, yes, it's an exercise injury, but I had to look at, well, could this physical pain that manifested in exercise be my unconscious way of communicating in some way that it had to manifest? And like, what is it? And so I realized, there was a part of me, that was just telling me to just slow down. And everything I had to do a bit more slowly. And it was on my left side, which connects to the feminine. And so I realized, just to slow down, to embrace that feminine and to relax more and to still be in flow and action, but slow down and still trust that everything will get done. And so I think when we're willing to just be open to the message of the pain, it can teach us, then we can, you could say, course correct and come more into alignment. So, but what I will say, yes, if you're guided to walk the Camino or do something differently or follow a dream and goal, it might be scary. Yes, it might be uncomfortable. It might be scary sometimes. You might feel some fear, but I also don't see that as a bad thing. I kind of like to say, look, if you don't feel some fear in life, probably the life that you're living is too small because you're not growing anymore. Like there's no discomfort or fear in walking to your kitchen. There's no growth. There's no growth there. But as you think about doing what you haven't done or making certain decisions, it might be scary. And I think it's okay that it's scary. To me, that's a sign that you're growing and you're
living.
And you're expanding and you're alive and you're not stagnant. And so I think it's beautiful that there's fear. We just have to learn to breathe into it and embrace it and, take the step anyway. Like when I left my father's church and had the conversation with my father, it took me 4 years to muster up the courage to have the conversation with my father. Because my father was not a guy that you really had a conversation with. He was old school. It's like my way or my way. Please take your pick, right? And so to have that conversation with my father at 18 was terrifying. And I remember walking up the stairs to his bedroom, shaking all the way, whilst having the conversation, afraid. After the conversation, oh shit, afraid of the conversation I just had. And so it's scary sometimes, and it's okay, but it's often a sign that we're growing, evolving, and following. I always tell people, go where it's scary. Sometimes we get caught in, sometimes we do something and it works. So we keep doing it and we keep doing it.
Yes.
And we and we're successful. And then people reinforce us and validate us for what we're doing. So we keep doing it, but we're no longer growing. And now we get kind of caught in a trap of success, a trap of the past. And that's, I think, when we're when we're kind of stagnant and we're
We're
living.
yes, we're in dangerous territory to stop pursuing living and growing, and the pursuit, because like that's complacence, and then we wonder why. Well, and then like you said earlier, then that head trap, I'll call it a head trap, comes in, where you get caught in your head and you're like, well, I should be happy. I mean, I've been doing this for years and it's always made me so happy. There must be something wrong with me. And then it's like
Yes.
this interesting spiral, and we could just get curious. And there's so much to me, I view that the fear, or the part that's kind of scary to take this leap, as the whole reason why whatever you're doing becomes worth it in the long run, because there's a price to pay. There's a sacrifice that you make in the form of whatever that may be. It could be financial, emotional, relationships. You make some sort of sacrifice to say, to communicate to God, to communicate. It's an energetic communication that's saying, I'm in this. I sign on. Let's go, baby. And then
freedom is not free.
Freedom is not free. Yeah, freedom is a very big responsibility, and in some cases can be a burden, because it requires immense amount of courage and self-awareness and strength to be able to really own. I mean, Jesus even said it. When they were killing him, he said, no man can kill me. I gladly give my life. And that to me is ultimate freedom, because it's like, not even in death can you take something from me. This is all my choice. And I could choose differently, but this is my choice. This is my path to go down. So I love the topic of pain and fear, and even like with your injury, the feminine side. It's like, I think what's so interesting about, and I'll say spiritual journey, we all just know that's just life, right?
Yeah.
Life is spiritual. We are spiritual beings living a human experience. And so we're on this path. And I think it could be easy to go to one extreme to the next, like becoming aware of ourselves, becoming so aware that like everything is now a sign. And like, you see those people that get a little bit spiritually paranoid, or on the other end where it's just like, you're kind of living vicariously and freely and floozy, and not really noticing, not having any self-awareness. So I think it's like such an admirable quality for us to be able to come to the middle of that and be able to balance the two extremes of being caught up in it and flowing with it. And so this brings me to this topic of surrender, which is, your book.
Yeah.
And this topic of surrendering, and gosh, it's actually a deep topic, and there's so many layers to it, but I'd like to hear where you're coming from when you talk about surrender. Are we talking about the human surrender? What are we talking about here when you talk about surrender?
There's levels to the conversation. There's levels to the conversation. And so for me, the book is a way to start a dialogue on an entry level into the conversation, but there's levels to it. And so, I think in our culture, there's many misconceptions about surrender, and this idea that surrender is weak, that surrender is passive, that surrender is waving a white flag, that surrender is giving up, that surrender is being a victim, that surrender is doing nothing, sitting there and doing nothing, that surrender is means you're going to get left behind, you're going to be a doormat, that you won't manifest your goals, dreams, and desires if you surrender. And so I'm actually saying no, that surrender, the real essence of surrender, is the most powerful thing that we can do as human beings in this lifetime. It's what we're here to do, really, on that spiritual level. And so when I look at the truly great ones, Jesus, a Buddha, a Gandhi, a Mother Teresa, a Mandela, a Martin Luther King, Bruce Lee, a Muhammad Ali, at some point in their own way, they and at different levels, they all surrendered themselves to that purpose that was bigger than themselves. They surrendered themselves to their soul. They surrendered themselves to the divine intelligence. They surrendered themselves to God, and in that surrender, they transcended their human egoic limitations, and they tapped into another dimension of life. And I think that's when life, God, the infinite intelligence, the divine, was able to use them and flow through them and express through them and manifest through them. And that's where miracles happen, where they were no longer the doer, and life was doing them, and life was manifesting through them in ways, I'm sure, that were probably beyond what they could have imagined with their own limited self. And so for me, it's like, what if you surrender and you didn't get less, but you got more? Maybe not what you thought, maybe not what you planned, maybe not what you expected, but more, because, you know, the mind is limited, the ego is limited, the personal power is very limited. And so surrender in a simplistic way is, yes, it's a letting go of control, or I should say a letting go of the illusion that we were in control in the first place. It's when we stop manipulating and forcing life to fit our limited idea of how we think it should be and who we think we should be, so that we can be available and open to take the limitations off of life that is unlimited, so that we can be available and open to this innate intelligence that we are part of, to live us and flow through us. And so for me, the old paradigm, which we've kind of been conditioned into as a culture up until now, has been all about asking the question, is a like ego-based model of living life, personal power-based, which is about what do I want? This sense of I, which is still I, based on a limitation. And you can create life and manifest life from the ego and create a good life, but it will be limited. You know, you might get what you thought you wanted, only to realize, and we've all had this experience where you achieve what you thought you wanted, only to realize that what you thought you wanted was not what you really wanted. It was just what you thought you wanted based on who you thought you were. And so for me, the question that I invite people to consider is not what do I want, because if you're not in touch with who you are, then your goals and dreams and desires will sometimes be based on, you know, ego and unmet needs from childhood. And
I was going to say pains,
projections. And so for me, the question becomes, okay, what is it that life wants to express through me? What is it that God wants to express through me? What is it that the divine, what is it that my soul, what is the deepest impulse of what life is seeking to express through me? And to allow yourself to be available and open to that intelligence. And I think that's when the magic happens, where we can catch that vision, feel what is seeking to emerge. Then we can align the mind and the ego and the personality to support the fulfillment of the deepest impulse of life. Then we give 100%. Then we can go full out, full effort, and give 100% without being attached to the outcome. And I think that's the essence of surrender at the first level of what I'm speaking about.
Yeah, you hit kind of like a base level, and you also hit the macro level, like the the kind of like the bigger picture of it. And sometimes this surrender has to happen every day to say, I love how you phrased it. It's very similar to how I phrase it when I'm in prayer or meditation, is to say, you know, I'm a vessel for what you want to create creatively through me. And let me just be a part of that process. It's an allowance. It takes it's like our culture seems to have lost their sense of specialness or uniqueness, whilst at the same time thinking that they're too special in a different way. And it's special in the ego way and not special in the soul way, to say that, yes, there is a potential for me to experience while I'm living this earthly experience, to collaborate with the divine in a way where I can actually be present with it rather than just it happening. Because when we're us eternal beings, when we're in soul version of ourselves, we can't have that conscious collaboration. We're not involved in the process. It's just doing through us. And the gift of the human experience, from my belief, is that we get to partner in a conscious way. And if we could only walk that path. And of course, there are many barriers along the way, but that's the journey, is the gift in that for what we get from it. So yeah, I love all of that. And might I say, I'm sure you've experienced a lot of pushback, backlash, critics along the way. And there comes a level where, oh, are you there?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. It's so still and stoic. That we just have to understand that that's also their purpose, that they're doing theirs, we're doing ours, and not detach, because detaching is forceful in itself, pushing away from, but remain unattached on our own path. Yeah,
absolutely. I think, you know, the way I see it is we live in a world of a 3D realm of duality. Of interdependent polaric opposites. That's the nature of life in this 3D. And so for me, the way I've found some peace is in just the acceptance and embrace of the reality of this domain. which is plus and minus, up and down, yin and yang, black and white, positive, negative in this domain, and
Yes.
so I think when we stop looking for perfection in people and perfection in ourselves and perfection in our personalities and perfection in friends and family, because everything in this world is temporary. And so it's just the Tao. And so, in life, there would be you could say there would kind of be no Jesus without Judas. There would be no Mother Teresa if there were no sick people.
Yes.
There would be no Mandela if there was no apartheid. And so it's the interdependent polaric nature of this realm, and so there's going to be haters. It's just part of the play, this sort of physics play of life, and so I think when we can embrace that, then we can find peace, because I think the real level of peace and perfection is not out here, it's within. It's within us, and that's that domain of soul, of that transcends duality.
Yes.
And the quote, "The kingdom of heaven is within."
Yes.
It doesn't say the kingdom of heaven is in a mansion, in a house, in a Lamborghini, and
with so and so. Yeah, have to have all these really. Yeah,
it's within. And that's the dimension of true freedom. And so and for me, what I've learned over time is, there's haters, but what I learned is they're not really hating me. That's kind of what I perceive. They're not, when people hate you, they're not really hating you. They're hating a part of themselves. And as a result, they project that onto you, because they don't even know you to hate you. And so how can someone hate you if they don't even know you? The thing is, we take it personally.
I was just going to say, suffering starts when we begin to take it personally. And
so I've had to learn, and I would encourage folks listening, I had to learn, especially when I started putting myself out there over the years, to firstly unplug myself from the negativity and the hate, so to speak. That was like one level. But the next level was unplugging myself from even the positive, comments, and like, "Oh, I love you, and you're amazing, and you're the best." It's like they're still both someone's projection. And so I think there's a freedom that comes when you unplug yourself from the negative and you unplug yourself from the positive, and you just rest in the truth of your own being and your own knowing as neutrality. Then there's freedom, because when you're attached to the positive, then you're still not free, because you're wanting to receive that positive validation. And so I think there's a freedom when you just know who you are, and there's a peace there in knowing that you're being yourself and you're giving your best.
Oh gosh, if you guys are watching this one on YouTube, you can see me just nodding and nodding, because that's one point that I'm very passionate about. It's actually an entire chapter in my book that I'm almost finished writing, is not being caught up in the positive or the negative, because all that is a requirement of something outside of ourselves in order to feel either okay or not okay. And when we can take ownership of how we feel inside, we put ourselves in position to operate more out of morality, integrity, and alignment, rather than whatever is going on out here, whatever feedback I'm getting that I need to change the way that I'm being. And this takes us away from being and into doing something, which is exactly the opposite of what's going to allow us to live that life of freedom. And what you just described is surrender. It's surrendering to the I don't know what I need. I don't know what I need to do. I'm just going to show up and present myself every day. And I surrender. I don't have the idea. I don't have a blueprint in my head, because the suffering happens when we have this blueprint outside of ourselves and it doesn't go the way that we wanted it to. And now all of a sudden this is bad for us. So I love it. So just before we wrap up, I know that you've got a time crunch and I really want to honor that. So tell us about your book, and then also just please share with us all the places we can find you. And I know you have an upcoming event as well. So please tell us about this.
People can get the book, The Magic of Surrender, Finding the Courage to Let Go. It's full of gems. It's kind of a simple roadmap to freedom, to finding the freedom within yourself. You can get the paperback on Amazon, so check it out there. If people want to know more about the event, maybe you're someone that you just feel ready for that next level of your life to heal, to transform, and to connect with your true inner sense of freedom and share your gifts with the world. This December, I'm doing an event in Bali. For the last 12 years, I've done 21 events. This is my 22nd, December the 5th through the 16th. And this is the final event I'm doing in Bali ever. I'm retiring the event and creating other things. And so if you feel a calling and you're inspired in some way, you can go to www.boundlessblissbali.com. That's boundlessblissbali.com. The event is called Boundless Bliss, and it's a life-changing event. It's truly very special. So you can find out more info there. My main website is kuteblackson.com. Find out more about me there. Instagram, Kute Blackson. Facebook, Kute Love Now. My podcast, Soul Talk.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. This event I'm extremely intrigued in. So I'm going to link all of these in the show notes for my listeners to find you, to follow you. And then if this event and retreat, it sounds like kind of a retreat. It's a multi-day
12
experience.
Days. 12
Yeah,
days.
12 days. So that is an experience,
it's
guys.
An experience.
And you want immersion. You know, I host retreats too, Kute. So I get it, how this immersive nature of whatever it is you're pursuing, being immersed in it for a time is transformational. So, gosh, we are just so blessed to have you. Thank you so much for the time that you spent with me today. I look forward to continuing connecting with you, following you, and being in relationship with you. And I know my listeners are going to be doing the same in their own way.
Appreciate you.
So thank you so much. And guys, thank you. You can find all of this information in the show notes. And if you're more interested, please go follow him. And until next time, we will talk to you very, very soon, guys. Love you all. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Ignite the Spark Within. If this podcast brought you value, or you think it would bring someone else value, please hit that share button. My mission is to reach and help as many people as I possibly can. And you just never know who could use that one good piece of information. And hey, if you have any topics, discussion questions, or ideas for future episodes, you can reach me directly at sarah@sparkflc.com and just write podcast in the subject line. And if you haven't already, please rate the podcast on your favorite podcast channel. This helps bring awareness to the show. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're alerted for all future episodes. Please go ahead and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're interested in pursuing coaching for yourself, you can visit sparkflc.com for more information.